Hey YouTube, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Melissa, and this channel is all about psychiatric drug withdrawal, reactions, and recovery. And it draws on my 7 years of experience in this community, as well as my own personal 4.5 year journey to recovery. And the probably thousands of conversations I've had at this point, both formally as a coach and informally, just with people that I've met in this community over the years. And the purpose of this channel is to provide hope in what often feels like a hopeless situation, and to also talk about topics that seem to come up regularly. Because I figure if one person is talking about it, then there's probably many others. And so that's what I share and talk about on this channel. And none of it is meant to constitute medical advice, it's just drawing on these experiences. So, the topic of this video is going to be about how each person's journey through withdrawal is unique. So before I get into it, I want to mention that I am coaching again. So I offer 30-minute calls and 60-minute calls. And if you're interested in talking about any of the layers of this experience, then I will put my direct booking link in the description of this video. So I got myself a microphone finally. Hopefully it's clear and loud and you guys can hear it. I know that my headphone microphone was sounding pretty bad. And when I wasn't using anything at all, it was pretty hard to hear. So let me know how this sounds, and I hope the light isn't super distracting. I can't shut it off, unfortunately, but I mean, I like it, so hopefully it works out. But so this topic, why does it matter? So I'm just going to refer to my notes here. So if you're going through withdrawal, it's easy to feel lost and confused, especially when doctors don't understand or gaslight your symptoms. And I've talked about it on this channel so many different times. The fact that many people, when they have reactions to these drugs, they come off these drugs and experience withdrawal symptoms. They have no idea what's going on. And so they go onto Google at some point and come across the Facebook groups, come across the forums like Surviving Antidepressants, Benzo Buddies, and it validates what they've been going through. So if it's like me, if your experience is like mine, for me, it took quite a few months of research to really understand what was going on, and found these forums and started reading, and it felt comforting for a while. But then often what happens is you start going down all of the different rabbit holes and you start searching for your specific symptoms, finding people who experience them, and then you kind of get obsessed with what happened to this person, where did they go, how long did it take them to recover, and if they disappeared, why did they disappear? And what did they do to get well? And you can become really entangled in the horror stories and in the overwhelm. And I find that that's what happens to so many people. And then the fear kicks in and you start wondering, will I be one of the people who takes years to recover? So that's what this video is all about, is the importance of staying in your own experience. And I really like that saying because one of my friends in withdrawal had seen a coach, and this was what was told to that person, to just stay in your own experience. And I really like that because I feel like it's just one simple line that you can think about over and over, and it can become like a motto or a mantra. And just, I feel like you need a lot of those reminders because you can get so entangled and almost obsessed with everybody's different experiences and stories. So I really like that saying. So the double-edged sword of online forums, so they are very validating, but they can really amplify fear. So you'll see extreme stories that make you question your own recovery. Some people recover quickly, other people it takes much longer, it seems. Comparing yourself to those stories only adds to the fear and uncertainty. So I have found, and I've also spoken on this channel before, that I find that there tends to be a lot of extreme thinking in this community, and people have kind of come at me before when I've said that, and they'll say, well, this is such an extreme experience, what do you expect? And the way that I'm referencing that is how I guess there's a lot of black and white thinking, in that this is the only way to go, and you need to avoid all of these things, and you need to do these things, and here's the only path to recovery. And what I have found over the years of being in this community is it's not black and white. So obviously I talk on this channel about averages, generalizations, patterns, because there are definitely patterns, but there's also outliers, and there's also different things that different people do to get to the end point. And I've noticed that, at least for me, taking a more neutral stance and looking at each individual case is better than looking at all of the different things and trying to think of it in such black and white terms. And oftentimes, what I tell people too is when they're struggling maybe to make a decision in their own journey, I always say, like, look at your own pattern, look at the past, try to look in hindsight at what has happened to you before and what tends to be your trends, because I would say that is a much better predictor of what the outcome might be for you than just searching for 8 hours a day and reading every possible scenario from every different person, and then trying not to feel overwhelmed and paralyzed by not knowing what to do next. So that's what I want to say about that. And here's a great personal story, I guess, about the importance of realizing that each person does have somewhat of a unique journey and experience. So my mom, I ended up moving back home with her when I was 37. So I was in my first withdrawal. If you're familiar with my story, I have two separate withdrawals, or what I consider to be two separate withdrawals. You could look at them as overlapping, but essentially I was on SSRIs for 7 years, did an only 4-week taper because that's what my doctor told me to do, was in withdrawal and really didn't know how to navigate it. And then I ended up reinstating after 2 years. And then I took a bunch of other drugs, including benzos. And then I went to kind of a second withdrawal. And all along the way, it was absolutely horrible. I mean, my second withdrawal was definitely worse than the first one, and I was much less functional. But all of the whole experience was terrible. And so in my first withdrawal, I moved back home and I was having trouble maintaining a job because I would go through periods where I wouldn't sleep for 3 days straight. And I never knew when that was going to happen. So it was hard to maintain a job, and my relationship was falling apart, and I just felt so bad mentally. I felt like I really just needed a break from my whole life. And so that's why I moved back home, and I had been gone for so many years. But my mom became my primary source of support. And I mean, until I met my 10-woman support group, but that was later on. And it was so difficult on so many levels for her to understand what I was going through, because she actually cold turkeyed the exact same drug as me that she had been on for a couple of years. And I believe she was on another SNRI or some other type of drug as well, which she cold turkeyed. And she didn't have a single withdrawal symptom, like not one. Sometimes or oftentimes the doctors will talk about, well, if you have withdrawal, it's only going to be a week or a month. The month kind of seems like that's like a long withdrawal according to a lot of doctors. My mom didn't experience any symptoms at all for any length of time. And so I think, especially since it was the same drug and we are genetically similar, and it's like, how can that even be possible? So it was really hard for her to comprehend what I was experiencing. And it just goes to show that everybody has different responses to these drugs, different experiences, different withdrawal experiences, even in the same family. So I had to bring that up. I often on this channel use the analogy of diabetes because I have had insulin-dependent diabetes for almost 30 years. And I've shared this before in other videos, but getting a chronic permanent disease at a young age taught me the importance of staying in my own experience. And obviously, like in my withdrawal, I fell prey to that, I guess, if you want to call it, of feeling addicted to the forums once I discovered them, and just needing to know what happened to every single person and what was the outcome and how did they get better. So obviously this wasn't perfect, but I did learn sort of on a foundational level that even though two people have the same disease, the outcomes can be very different. And prime example, my cousin has the same type of diabetes as me and went completely blind from it much sooner than I've had diabetes in total. And so it was very scary to get the same diagnosis at a young age and think, this is my future. This is what my future holds, because she came to visit me in the hospital, obviously. And all of a sudden, her blindness had different meaning to me, because I was like, oh my goodness, what I have now is what caused her to lose her sight. So that was very terrifying. But I remember distinctly my doctor at the time sitting at the end of my hospital bed, because I was in the hospital for 2.5 weeks when I got diagnosed. And I remember him saying, and it wasn't verbatim because I can't quite remember, but it was something like, Melissa, you're not diseased, you're not sick, you're not, it was something like that. Maybe not in those exact words, but the idea behind it was you can still live a normal, good, high quality of life despite having this. And don't get into that, I guess, thinking like a sick person, which I didn't really know what that meant at the time. And it has more meaning to me now as I've had diabetes for so many years. And obviously, again, I try to have a balanced approach to this. Like, obviously, there's an acknowledgement. You have to acknowledge what you're going through, the difficulty of it, the suffering. But it's another reminder to really stay in your own experience, because what happened to that person is not necessarily the outcome for you. And that can be really hard. Like, this can become a practice and a skill to develop. It doesn't come easily or naturally to a lot of people. So especially when you're in this type of state, you want to find answers. You want to know what's going to happen. And so many people in your real life are unable to give you any answers. So the online space is your source of information. And so it's natural to be looking for that. But at the same time, the importance of really understanding that this journey is unique in a lot of ways is really important to remember. I've said to people a lot of times before that the coping skills and a lot of the things that you sort of learn along the way can serve you really well after this experience. So you develop a lot of self-awareness. And obviously when you're in acute and even through this journey, it feels very traumatizing. But once you come out of it, you realize that a lot of the things that you took for granted before, you now really enjoy and you don't take for granted, and your experience of little things in your life is different and has more meaning. And it can help you to develop a lot of self-compassion and develop boundaries with people, because a lot of times you have to set those up in your journey because you might or often won't be able to engage in certain activities, or maybe you've made plans when you're in a window and then in a wave you just can't do it. And so you really learn to be, I guess, assertive and to be communicative. And I don't know, I guess maybe I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but at least for me, it's given me a lot of skills that serve me well now in coping with everyday life and everyday stressors. And a lot of people will say too that things that used to bother them so much don't bother them anymore because they're looking at it through the lens of they've gotten through withdrawal, which was the most horrifying experience imaginable. And so traffic jams and day-to-day stressors just don't impact them in the same way. So I want to say that. I guess I wanted to, maybe this kind of segues into this, but maybe I should put this at the beginning of the video, but I just want to say that because of the volume of emails and messages I've been getting, it's just becoming too much for me to keep up with. And so I'm not going to be able to, moving forward, be adding people from this space onto social media because it just ends up tipping my work-life balance off. And in the past, that's caused me to need to take breaks and need to exit the community for a while and come back. And I really, really, really do love helping people through this, but I have to set those boundaries to protect my peace. So I just ask that if you have a lot of questions, that you just book a coaching session, because also too, I feel like it's a lot more fair to be doing that rather than getting an email from someone and not knowing anything about their background, their history, where they're at in their journey. Like, I think there's a lot of importance in getting that context and that backstory. In fact, I know that there is. And so it's more fair to me and to you to hop on a call, even if it's just one time, just to be able to offer some guidance or just some more information about my own journey or all of the different things that I talk to people about. So I just wanted to say that one of the biggest fears people have is how long will this take? And it's a perfectly understandable question and fear that people have. And I want to say that from my experience, most people have windows and waves. So I've talked about it before on this channel. And what I've seen on average is that the first 6 months tend to be the toughest. 2 to 6 months is particularly rough because a lot of people, it seems, who take SSRIs have a bit of a honeymoon period. Not always. I didn't. Like when they come off and then their symptoms hit them. And so it seems like the 2 to 6 month off time frame seems to be really, really hard and challenging for people. And then what happens or tends to happen is people will start getting glimmers or small windows at about 6 months. And then this can get more and more chopped up into windows and waves as time goes on. And then between 18 and 24 months, it seems like the healing can accelerate from there, or they'll start getting bigger windows or more hope or whatever. So some people do tend to turn that corner between 18 and 24 months. Now, obviously, this isn't the case for everybody at all. But I'm talking in averages. And we tend to think of in this community as the people who have windows and waves, well, obviously they're recovering. But if I'm someone who is not experiencing windows and waves, I'm just bad all the time, then I've actually been surprised how often I've seen those people have more rapid recoveries. So this is just another reason to trust the process, because you never quite know what's going on under the surface, and don't look at, again, well, that person's getting a windows and waves, so obviously they're getting better and I'm not, because it is different for different people. I went a very long time without having a window. If you talk about my first withdrawal, when my symptoms came back, if you know my story, and then I reinstated, and then I went into that second withdrawal. So there was a long period of time where I didn't get a window. And what I say to people who are not experiencing definitive or any windows and waves is that one of the best things you can do is almost live vicariously through other people who have recovered. That was majorly something that I had to do. Was I had to trust other people's stories of recovery, because it didn't seem like I was getting better. And so I had to look at the people who had gotten better and trust that that would be me one day. It was a lot of encouragement from other people and seeking out success stories and that kind of thing, because it can be very challenging to see or feel like you're making any progress if you don't see those definite windows and that windows and waves pattern. I know that some of the forums, one of them in particular that I won't mention here, they tend to really encourage people to track their progress daily, hourly. And I understand why they do that. They're trying to make informed decisions about guiding people, which I talked about earlier in this video, like the importance of getting the whole story. It is important, and that's why talking to people is so much more effective than just reading about it. But so I understand why they do it, because they are just, a volunteer run forum. But also what I've seen is a lot of times it makes people more aware and more obsessive about their symptoms. And obviously this is not like withdrawal is not psychological, but those types of things can make a difference in people's level of fear and levels of despair. So I don't personally recommend that, but I do think it is really important to track your progress in some way. So a lot of times you're looking at things in 3 to 6 month time frames, because when you chunk it out sort of in bigger chunks, it's easier to be able to see your progress. So something that you can reflect on, whether that's making some journal entries or video journals. That was a big thing for me and still is. I still video journal all the time. Or when you're in a window, make yourself almost a pep talk video that you can reflect back on when you're in a wave and see yourself like objectively like that when you're doing better. Or having a coach or having healing buddies, support people that can give you that objectivity and reflect back to you how far you've come. I think that is really important, because you do get lost in the experience, and it's so hard for you to see things objectively and sort of overall, because you tend to focus on the current wave, the current day, the couple of weeks I've just felt horrible, and you just get so kind of tunnel visioned in that. So it is important, I think, to have some type of reporting or a sounding board. So I just wanted to say that. So just some of my final thoughts and encouragement. So this journey is uniquely yours. Trust your body's healing process, set boundaries when needed, and focus on your own personal journey. If you're struggling, reach out to me, or I do encourage people to find supports that are specific to this space because there's nothing really quite like it. And we have a very unique journey in a lot of ways. And so it's very validating and comforting to be able to talk to people who are also experiencing the same thing and understand firsthand what you're going through. So I always encourage people to try to find at least one or two healing buddies, talk to a mentor or a coach or someone who's recovered, and just really focus on the healing and the positive stories of recovery. So let me know in the comments what has helped you stay grounded in your experience, and what are your thoughts just on this topic? I'd love to hear them. And I know that a lot of people read the comments, and it's just a way for people to connect further about their journeys and their experiences. And I hope you're doing well, and I'll see you next time. Bye.